Welcome to Boundless Pursuit, a weekly podcast providing motivation, entertainment, and education to anglers and outdoorsmen. I hope that the stories you'll find here will encourage you to chase your passion more fervently, to open your mind to new opportunities and perspectives. Your engagement and feedback is critical to the growth of this show, and I would love to hear your suggestions on topics or potential guests. You can reach me at boundlesspursuitfishing@gmail.com or at my website, www.boundless-pursuit.com. That's where you'll find all related articles, media, and merchandise. Please remember, the show will gain traction from your support. Be sure to like, comment, and share this podcast to your friends and connections. I'm your host, David Graham. Now let's get on to today's episode. All right, I'm very excited for this one today because we're getting out of the local waters and we're talking major bucket list stuff. And the chances are, if you've seen any high quality photos or video of gigantic peacock bass caught deep in the jungles or the gnarly, wild looking fanged pyara fish, you've probably seen the page or content provided by Fish Colombia. And today's guest is the man behind Fish Colombia, Alberto Mejia. And man, I got so excited knowing that Alberto was coming onto this podcast because this is a destination in Colombia that I have dreamt of going to. And in due time, I know it's going to happen. Fish Colombia specializes in adventure fishing trips for massive peacock bass in excess of 20 pounds, giant pyara, and various unique species of catfish, some of which can grow to colossal size. And its operations in the Orinoco River system and remote Colombian jungle have attracted visits from some of the most recognizable anglers on earth, including one former podcast guest, Larry Walker. It's a trip and a destination that Larry has gone on many, many times, even with his buddy Jimmy Houston. And Fish Colombia offers the adventurous angler opportunities to catch spectacular fish on fly or conventional gear. And on the flip side of the freshwater jungle fishing opportunities is the insane saltwater fishing, popping, jigging, fly fishing, deep dropping in world-class locations for fish like cubera snappers, jacks, sailfish, yellowfin tuna, roosterfish, and so much more. And what's incredible is you're doing this fishing with some of the most pristine wilderness around you. From the jungle landscapes to the various kinds of bird, mammals, reptiles, just the ambient environment around you, I think is what makes this experience as a whole seem so incredible. And honestly, I think on a global scale, Fish Colombia has some of the most incredible opportunities to catch dream fish. Alberto's just a young guy who visualized a dream career and he made it happen. And his dream spawned the dream of countless anglers from all over the world seeking to catch some of the most recognized and unheard of sport fish on the planet. I'm just honored and excited to get this guy on here. This is Alberto Mejia of Fish Colombia. Like action, but all right, man. Well, Alberto, I'm glad that I got you on here. I was worried that I lost you a couple days ago because you run an operation in Colombia, in Fish Colombia, that is one of my dream locations, and I think a lot of people would agree with it. But I first stumbled across Fish Colombia and that now I guess sort of like iconic logo of the peacock bass. A few years ago, maybe I don't even know, 5 or 6 years ago, playing on YouTube, just looking up peacock bass, like the big peacock bass, and I saw that Stu Walker video, and at the very end or maybe the very beginning, they put the Fish Colombia logo up on the screen. I was like, all right, what is this? Is this the place that he went? I got to know more because the video is phenomenal. The fish are incredible. Every element of the experience looked like everything I would ever want as an adventure-loving angler. And then I stumbled across Fish Colombia, and you're kind of like the guy behind that. But I don't know, man. Just tell me how all this came to be. Is this something that you built yourself?
Yep. So Fish Colombia started out 9 years ago. or even before that, I was exploring all these really wild places in Colombia. First, initially in the jungles for peacock bass and payara and catfish, and it was my passion. I loved doing it. I was studying engineering simultaneously, but I started posting all that on social media, and there was really no one offering any remote fishing expeditions to the jungles of Colombia at that time. So I got contacted by a few people from initially it was from South Africa and Japan, and I had they're like, I want to come and do that, and I was like, well, let's go, and then we can split the cost, and that's how it started. And the next year it was I was doing that full time, and from there pretty much simultaneously I started doing trips to the Pacific Ocean, and a couple of years later I got my first boat, the Bizcocho, and it's grown a lot from there. Right now we have 3 freshwater lodges and a saltwater lodge in the North Pacific Ocean, close to the Panama border. And we specialized in taking people to the most remote places in Colombia. And just last year, we actually changed completely our approach to our business. And in Colombia is an area where the government doesn't really do much for conservation. The fisheries aren't really managed at all. So, all my life, I've been, struggling with that because, they really don't care. So I decided that we could do a better job ourselves, as a private company taking care of these places. So right now we're doing all scientific fishing. So we have biologists doing programs, letting us know what indicators we need to collect. For instance, getting genetic samples from all the yellowfin tuna we catch to know where the populations are traveling from, what size populations they are, and that way generating valuable information for being able to manage these fisheries in the short, long, and medium and long term. So, right now, as you know, getting a certain backlash. So that backlash that fishing's got, because of the, very radical, let's not say conservation, it's more like I'm environmentalist. It's a way to make the whole world, even people who don't fish, understand the importance of sport fishing for these really remote areas, to be able to take care of them, to be able to protect them from mining, logging, commercial fishing, and just in general, all these things that take away from fishing. And we love conservation. Most people don't understand. They've never been to these places, but they can understand the importance of these studies, the importance of this information, the importance of a biologist speaking on our behalf, on behalf of fishing, saying how important it is to be able to take care of these places. So that's Fish Colombia right now.
Oh, that's awesome. That was a topic that I was, I have listed to bring up. Obviously, I wanted to touch on maybe a little bit later, but I'll kind of touch on it now, just based on what you're bringing up, because I had read the news like headlines, and even it made news here, like in the States, that Colombia was like kicking around the idea, and the Supreme Court was talking about putting an outright ban on sport fishing. And I'm like, wow, like, you've never really hear about that. It's something we always like fear as anglers. Like, will there ever come a day where this is considered animal cruelty and gets outlawed and it gets banished? And I saw where that had been talked about in Colombia. And I remember as soon as I read that, like, you were the first person I thought of. I'm like, holy crap. I'm like, there's people down there where this is like their livelihood. Like, this is their business. Like, this is generating employment opportunities for people. And it's like, now they're talking about potentially like shutting it down. And then like, after I saw that, like, I'd always wondered, like, well, you're still operating, like y'all are still running trips. So what is the status of that? Is it still like a fight that's ongoing, or?
Yeah. So really, initially when that came out, it was pretty much a very radical environmental movement saying that, it's documented that sport fishing can cause just as much harm as commercial fishing, and just a bunch of nonsense. So they initially, the Supreme Court approved the ban or the prohibition of recreational fishing. Or so what that means is that you're not allowed to go fishing with the sole intent of catching a fish to let it go. So what they're doing is banning one of the reasons why you would go fishing, not the act of fishing at all. So if you're going fishing because you want to catch a yellowfin for dinner and you happen to catch a sailfish, or that tuna is just too big, that's still legal to. No one's saying it's illegal to release a fish. Because right now, even the commercial guys, if they catch a species that's not allowed, they have to release it. What they're saying is that you can't fish for fun. So obviously, that's first of all, it's impossible to enforce. Second of all, there's so much um, the communities, the indigenous communities, the African American communities in the Pacific Ocean, and just in general, there was a general outcry even from the scientists saying how retarded of a decision it was. So it's kind of being they're backing away from it. But if they were to apply that, that's actually already exists in Germany and several countries in Europe where you're not even allowed to release a fish. But I have a German friend that says, trout are slippery. So.
Right. So so that's interesting how you say it's not if so long as it's if the sole purpose is catching and release and enjoying it, then that should be banished. So I would think, and it sounds like, I mean, if you just add a layer of scientific study or conservation.
Correct. So that's exactly what we did. We did a scientific study or a project with biologists where they formulated the actual research paper for creating the first scientific research center on the Colombian Pacific Ocean. And we're currently replicating that for our freshwater operations. We've already had biologists down, and we're actually generating very, very important scientific data that was really needed to be able to take care of these fisheries, because we really don't know. The government has no control. They don't know absolutely at all what populations of what species are here, what time of year, or control on the commercial side. So it was critical that we did this. And on the other hand, it's great for marketing. Of course, I would rather spend my money with the guy who's doing something for conservation versus the other guy.
Right.
And third, it totally got us around the law and it's also creating barriers between our company and all the other, companies on a global scale, differentiating our company as, leader in conservation.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. Because it's funny because here in Florida, where I live, I mean, everybody knows the overwhelming majority of like population statistics and length weight data surveys and just all the information that like the FWC, which is Florida's Fish and Wildlife Conservation Agency. I mean, the overwhelming majority of their data comes from surveys that they take at the boat ramps. I mean, I see these guys almost every time I go out and I'm coming back in with my boat. You'll have a guy standing there with a marked FWC truck and a clipboard, and he's just collecting data like, how many fish did you catch? What species did you catch? Can we take a look at them? Can we take measurements? Because it's such a valuable resource for data collection is recreational anglers. So it just seems like a silly way to, I don't know, cut your opportunities to collect that data, but it's good that you're throwing that back at them because it's kind of common sense stuff, and it's a battle that if you're smart with, you really can't lose.
Yeah, and so we contacted several, private universities and investigators that are working with fisheries in Ecuador and Mexico, and they were, super excited to have this opportunity. This for them was a golden opportunity because we have boats on the water every day of the year, all year round, gathering valuable information that they would never be able to gather because no one has the money to run a boat 50 miles offshore every day of the year. While we're seeing crazy stuff that no one's ever documented on this coastline, and now for them it was free. So they were stoked to be part of the project, and we hope to be able to gather some very, very important information on the migratory paths, on the the weather changes, the Nino, all the currents, and temperatures, and really be able to influence how they take decisions.
Yeah.
The medium term goal is to expand, at least for our Pacific operation, is to expand the SIPA, which is the exclusive artisanal fishing zone that was created 10 years ago, and it protects the first 4 miles of the coast from all kinds of commercial fishing. And by gathering information, we're going to be able to expand that to 20 or 30 miles where there's no commercial fishing of any sort.
Oh, that's cool. Okay. Well, the other side of that I'm always wondering too, like especially with regards to shutting something down, and forgive my ignorance, but I mean, I'm going to be asking questions also on behalf of a lot of people who are curious about any kind of like ecotourism or tourism in general in Colombia. I can't think of. I mean, aside from fishing, what are the main, I mean, is Colombia getting a lot of international travel and tourism that's
Yeah,
boosting the economy anyway, or?
Colombia right now, tourism is becoming one of the most biggest things right now for generating employment and for upcoming companies. Um, there's a lot of tourism to see, like the different cities, the country, the nightlife, the wildlife. Colombia is the first country in the world in a number of bird species, butterfly species, plants. The second in the world in biodiversity, like the fourth in species of fish. So a lot of people are coming for bird watching, for ecotourism, for seeing the countryside. It's only a 2.5, 3 hour flight from several U.S. cities.
Yeah.
Very convenient trip to do. Safe country, and it's becoming very, very, very big tourism right now.
That's good, because I'd wondered if they'd like sort of weighed what the economic, win or loss would be if shutting down sport fishing, because I know that's got to draw a massive boost in tourism.
They didn't look at any studies. They didn't look at any information. They just looked at how they thought it was, cruel, and their feelings, and that's how it started. But they've had a lot of backlash because like indigenous communities sued the law because it's going against their right to work. It's going against their traditions. So, like for instance, same deal happened with bullfighting 10 years ago, and right now it's 100% legal. It's obviously a legal battle, and it's definitely a foreshadowing of what's going to be happening soon in a lot of countries. But it's definitely not a battle that anyone's willing to lose. And then even the worst case scenario really isn't that bad, which is like what they have in Germany.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned one other thing. This is backtracking a little bit into what you were saying, but it's when people take these, I don't know, like life risks. You mentioned that you were studying, you were in school, you had a like life trajectory that was heading towards a career in engineering, where there's like going to be good money in most cases, most scenarios. But you ventured off that course to go towards fishing. And like, so when I heard that, I'm like, oh, okay, I got to know more about that, because, for some people, I think that's a tough decision to make. Maybe mom and dad are like, what do you think you're doing? Like, this is where the money at. This is where your education's at. This is where whatever's at. And you want to go fishing? Like, what are you talking about? Was that a decision that you struggled with? I mean, is this something you thought like, holy cow, like this is
not really? To be honest, I've always taken risks lightly. I've never been scared to take a risk. Mm-hmm. And I see failure as a possibility in anything I've ever done in life. So I just always saw it like a done deal.
Yeah, that was one I had to ask about, because like, man, that is, some people may struggle with that.
Yeah, it's more important to be happy than to be important. And I always knew that. So I love my life. Wouldn't change my life. So I'm pretty happy that, pretty sure it would have been easy to fail somewhere along the line, but you can always keep trying and get it done.
Right. And then you yourself, I mean, fishing is just something you were already doing before you started all this anyway. I mean, this was an inherent interest and passion of yours. I mean,
I think I was lucky. I was still in college, and I didn't really have too many responsibilities, and I was able to take the risk more lightheartedly. But yeah, I was already fishing. I was spending all my money fishing anyways. So
yeah. Oh man. Well, so I want to talk about, obviously my first impression of Fish Colombia was the peacock bass thing. And then over time, obviously I learned there's so much more to the operations you're running than just that fish, but it's kind of like, it's the focal point almost of the brand because it's your logo. But when I think peacock bass, a lot of people don't realize, myself included, just how many different kinds of peacock bass there are. I mean, we've got them here in Florida, but it's nothing like what y'all have there. And correct me if I'm wrong, but do y'all have, I mean, they're so big. Like, they're so big in the rivers that you're operating on. Are these the biggest variant of peacock bass? Like, what species do y'all have? What's the top end size? What are some of the bigger ones that you've seen pulled from your operations? Tell me a little bit about the fishery itself for peacock bass.
Yeah, so worldwide, I can't recall right now officially the exact number of species that's been classified, but it's far from the actual number of species that exist. Up to a few years ago, there was only 3 or 4 species classified. Now I believe it's something like 7 or 8. But there's really been very few, if any, genetic studies done on a lot of the populations of peacock bass, which is something we're going to be starting to do. Because I believe that even in the venues that we fish, there's very important differences between the temensis, which is a large species of peacock bass that we catch. But yeah, there's the large species, the one that's very sought after that grows to 30 pounds is the temensis. Cicla temensis is a scientific name. They actually tried to plant them in Florida in the 80s and 90s, I think it was, but they can't survive the cold front. So they all died away. But those, they grow to 30 pounds. They're extremely aggressive species of fish it was designed by sport fishermen for sport fishermen. They grow really quick. They're very numerous where they're found. They're very aggressive. They can be caught several times. They spawn and breed very fast. They grow quickly. They're the dominant species of predator in the lowland rivers where they're found. So they're only found in lowland rivers, not rivers flowing down from the mountains. So they're very sediment low rivers where they have to be. And the world record right now is 29 pounds. We've caught specimens in our operations over 26. And peacock bass are definitely probably the centerpiece of the fishing in the jungles of Colombia. But definitely more and more we've grown, or the interest for pyara has grown to where I would say right now it's almost as big of a draw for people coming there, which that's something that we've changed through our social media because no one really knew what a pyara was, 7 or 8 years ago. But yeah, peacock bass are insane. We catch 3 different species, or 4 different species in our destinations. They are all beautiful. They're all great sport. The large species, gets really big, so it's extremely strong. It fights like a saltwater fish, so that's why it's so sought after. But really, what's special about the peacock bass is where they're found. So we're really going really far, really remote places where not even Colombians go because it takes so much effort to get there. So you end up seeing some of the most beautiful remote places in the world that still exist, that are completely conserved, where indigenous communities live like they lived 500 years ago. And that's managed to also take care of these places, because if there wasn't someone there paying money to, like some tourists paying money for us to employ these people, for us to pay indigenous fees, they would be killing the fish, or they would be mining, or they would be netting commercially or logging, because they have to live off something. So
right.
The places where sport fishing gets in time are places that are protected forever, as long as sport fishing is still there.
Yeah, that's good. Because I was wondering too, like when you mentioned earlier that it had started with, some guys had contacted you from, I don't even remember where you said, overseas, people like, hey, and I'm interested in coming to catch these fish. Were you already, like, what the early trips that you were taking people on? Who was the guide? You yourself? I mean, it's like you don't just jump into. And where were you taking them?
I was out for the first 4 or 5 years. I was the only employee in the company, pretty much, except for like the people I would hire in the on site. But initially, I was the only guide. I still guide. I don't do it full time. I guide 1 or 2 weeks out of the month now. But because I do all the sales, so I have to be with contact to be able to keep people coming down. But yeah, initially I was the sole guide of the company and photographer and marketing and everything.
Sheesh, that's crazy. I always wonder how these things get started, especially when you go somewhere so remote, because you have to have certain resources to make it through. But yeah, that's just nuts. But the other thing I'm wondering though is, like, you're right. It's such a marketable species of fish, just because they're big. It's a beautiful looking fish, but then people call them peacock bass, and I was just wondering, is there a local name that people, I don't know, indigenous to there, call them? Because it's it's not a bass, but it's like they're all often referred to as a bass. And I don't know if that's for marketability reasons or what, but I mean,
they're actually not bass, but cichlids.
right.
But they are Colombia referred to as pavon, which means a peacock, like the bird, or a turkey, species of turkey. And then, you know, throughout the range in different countries, they have different names. But yeah, they're called also peacock in Spanish. And then the bass name was given to it by the first people who fished for them in the 70s and 60s, from, you know, the States.
Yeah. Well, and I always wonder that too. It's like the guys that I don't know, the locals. I mean, do they hold the fish in the same regard, or is like, what the hell is everybody so excited about this fish for? It's always funny how that works in every different part of the world. The people that live.
That's actually a great question, because the locals in areas where sport fishing doesn't exist treat peacock bass like a trash fish.
Yeah,
and they,
I knew it.
They, you know, if they catch one, they'll give it to their hogs or something, or they will eat it, but they don't really like it.
Yeah.
Areas where sport fishing is a thing, they obviously, you know, it's their only source of income, and they want them to be alive. So people take extreme measures to make sure that people don't kill their bass, to make sure no one's netting. For instance, in some of the indigenous reservations where we work, if the community finds out that someone killed a big peacock bass over 10 pounds, like the natives, they won't let that native be a fishing guide for the season.
Okay.
So sport fishing has changed their mentality in regards to the peacock bass.
That's funny because, you know, we mentioned a little bit before we started recording, like, you know, kind of the direction I'm going with the podcast and some of my motivations behind doing it. And we see a lot of that here in the States with species of fish we have here in our backyard. That ironically, a lot of our most, you know, sporty species we have here, the ones that get the biggest, the fastest, the strongest, the most unique, for whatever reason, the folks that are most local to those areas, a lot of the times they end up being considered a trash fish. And I'm like, what is with that? Like our alligator gar is the same way. And yet on a global scale, it's a very, like, it draws a lot of interest from international anglers because it's freaking gigantic. It's an awe-inspiring animal. I mean, it's a very unique thing. And then, so, and obviously with fancy shows like River Monsters and things like that, it's perception has started to change even here. But it's funny you mentioned that it's kind of been considered or historically may have been considered a trash fish. But yeah, I think obviously rebranding or the renaming or just calling it a peacock bass is going to bring in a lot of interest from our guys. And I guess notably people like Jimmy Houston. I've seen him out there quite a bit. He was one of the guys that I think was really putting his footprint there early with putting these fish on the map, just from the perspective of a bass guy. Because Jimmy Houston is like, you know, he's like the bass guy. He's like a largemouth bass guy. And obviously guys like my buddy Larry Walker, who's been on the show, and I know they come down there and fish with you. It seems like quite often. But it's been instrumental in probably getting the American clientele interested. But just real interesting stuff. But the fishing, the nature of the fishing is what kind of interests me too. I always wondered, because it looks very physical. All the videos that I watch, it looks like, you know, you're working, and maybe there's a lot of fish, but like, excuse me, something flew in my eyeball. I'm on my back porch here in Florida, so like wildlife is an element to these podcasts. Something just flew in my eye. But I watch these videos where the lures that they're throwing, like these big wood choppers, and they're just like chop, chop, chop. It's like, it seems like a very physically demanding style of fishing. But tell me a little bit about just the nature of the fishing. Is more like hunting? Are y'all using bait, or are you exclusively using lures? Is it sight fishing, or is it just casting and casting and casting? Very much like hunting.
So it's a bit of everything, honestly. We sight cast for the fish on the banks. We blind cast lures for them, areas that look good. We fish a lot of seams like you would for trout or salmon, where fish would hold. We fish mostly for peacock bass and pyara. We fish only artificials and fly fishing, but we also do a lot of bait fishing for catfish, for pacu for maturing, even for payara and peacock sometimes, and for saltwater, of course, for a lot of species with bait. So yeah, it's a very like diverse type of fishing. We find, even in the freshwater, opportunities for jigging, like you would for walleye, all kinds of different styles of fishing. So it's very diverse in that regards. We have a lot of people come to fly fish that want to focus on sight casting, so we look for those scenarios. It just depends on what gear they're using, what species they want to catch. But there's an opportunity for all the type of fishing that you mentioned.
Yeah, yeah. I was just thinking, like, every time I watch the videos, I'm like, man, this does not look like it's necessarily for the faint of heart. Like, it looks like people who have the ambition to come down there and make a trip, they need to be realistic about, the physicality of the fishing. That it's not just coming in. Maybe some of it is a little bit relaxing, but I don't know if you.
It's definitely physical. I mean, you're casting, you're moving, you're on the water for 11 hours a day in the sun. But that being said, a lot of our clients are, over 65, 70 years old.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I always say if you can deal with the Florida heat, that's about the worst part of the trip, is the heat and the humidity. But, if you fish as hard as you want to fish.
Yeah. Well, I say that, but guys like Larry Walker who are in their 70s, he's like an outlier because that guy is like a freak of nature, like a physical like anomaly. The fact that he can fish as hard as he does at his age, it's incredible. That guy just blows my mind though. I hope that I can go that hard when I'm that age, but we'll see. But you keep mentioning these other species of fish, and I want to kind of go down that road because obviously we can talk the peacock bass thing, but there's a lot more. There's so much more offered by the lodge, and you're mentioning, and I'll slaughter the names of some of these fish. I apologize. My redneck English, I'll say it wrong. I always thought it's pyara,
Yep, that's right.
Now people have probably heard you say that a few times. Like, what is he talking about? What is that? And a lot of people will already know what it is, but to describe what that species is, because I'll be frank, like, and honest with you, man. If, or I should say, when I come to Colombia, I'll almost be more interested in that species than the peacock bass. That is a gnarly, wild, phenomenal animal right there. Tell me a little bit about that species.
Yeah, so payara, they're found usually in fast water. They're migratory. They look and fight a lot like salmon, and they're very prolific. It's one of the most abundant species of fish in our river systems, fortunately. So it's great fishing. They're very hard to get hooked. They have 7-inch fangs, so they're also referred to as vampire fish. And they weren't very known in the sport fishing world up until recently. And right now, I would say, people are coming down just as excited about the payara as they do about the peacock. And while their fishing for them is very different from one to the other, they're both extremely fun. One of them lives in the fast water, the other one in the calmer water. So you can catch them both pretty much the same day, fishing different areas of the rivers. And it's definitely one of the prime species of game fish and fresh anywhere on Earth. They can grow to 35, 40 pounds, and they'll give you a fight like crazy. They're very hard to land, like tarpon. They get off really easily, so they're very hard to catch. But that being said, you usually get a lot of shots of them. So we have 100 payara caught in a days, which means you're getting 400 bites a day.
Jeez. Well, that was one of my questions too, because it seems like, as I mentioned earlier, I am going to Guyana in September, and I know that's one of the species people will catch there. But it seems like the ones in Colombia are just so much bigger. Like it's like a different monster there.
It's a different species. The ones in Guyana are called Hoplias scomberoides, and the one in the Orinoco Basin are called Hoplias aymara. Or oh, sorry, I did that wrong. I butchered it.
Yeah, that's the wolffish. I think you're referring to. Yeah.
It's Hydraulicus scomberoides, the one in Guyana. And that species, if you, for instance, look at it in the pet trade, they grow less fast and they tend to have a smaller max size. That being said, they do grow, 25 pounds. And then the other species is the Hydraulicus armatus, which is the one in the Orinoco Basin. And they tend to be a little more robust and just more of an abundant animal. They grow faster. and I think that's why they're more prolific in the Orinoco. But they're two different species.
Yeah, that's definitely. I think as far as in terms of fresh water, that's got to be one of the most uniquely equipped species that there is. It's the fangs that they have, and every time I see the photos of that, those two big fangs that stick up from that bottom jaw, I'm like, I get curious, like, what is the functionality of that? Like, what is the use? It almost looks like it would get in the way.
They use them for slashing and killing their prey. And a lot of times either they hold it in their mouth or you just injure it and come back around and grab it.
Okay.
And they lose those fangs when they're hunting. They actually have replacement fangs like sharks growing in the back of their mouth at all times. They're very unique.
Yeah, that's it. I saw some lodge down there. It may have been further to the south, somewhere further into South America, where it was like if you catch one, that you've got like I don't remember where I saw it. The guy took the tooth of one, and he got like one of the indigenous people to actually use the tooth to make a tattoo with the tooth. I was like, oh my gosh, like, I don't have any tattoos, but I was like, I would maybe be tempted to do that just because how badass it would be. But I look at a fish like that and its hardware and think of like fishing for those. The teeth are not necessarily cutting teeth, are they? I mean, is that a hazard? Is it going to cut through your line with those teeth, or is that more like for puncturing?
Yeah, they cut through 100-pound mono like it was butter. So we're using wire. They have those two fangs, but they have also razor sharp teeth, like little fangs that crisscross all through their mouth. But yeah, they're more for stabbing. But funny enough, they cut through mono like nothing. You know, like cubera snapper that has giant fangs, they don't cut through mono, but these guys do.
That's interesting. And I would think, like, I know with a lot of more toothy fish like that, I would think that a single J on each, like replacing treble hooks with a single J might be more efficient. Now, people doing that, like
mandatory single hook policy in our
so
trips, because on one hand it does increase the hookup ratio. On the second hand, if you have a treble, attached to your hand and the fish on the other side, it can be very dangerous, very very dangerous for the boat crew. Since the pyara they get on hooks so easily, you'll have lures flying through the air. So it's just a lot safer to use the single hooks, and it's actually a lot more effective. So you still lose bites, you still lose a lot of bites, but the ones that get hooked tend to stay hooked.
That's cool. Well, that's it. I guess that favors all parties. Then it's probably better for the fish. And then I would have thought, just looking at the mouth, I was thinking to myself, like, man. And like I said, they've got them where I'm going in September. And I was thinking to myself, like, I think I might, want to use single hooks instead of treble hooks for something like that. But I think a lot of people who think that area of Colombia or that environment, it's like, you think peacock bass and you even think pyara, but like, what are some of the other fish that maybe probably deserve a little more credit, but maybe people aren't even aware of that live down there? Like, what are some of the other species?
For lures, probably my favorite species is the matringsa. Turnover fish, Ryken is the genus of species of fish. They're caught all through the Amazon basin, all the way into the Parana basin. They're called Jaturana in Bolivia. And those guys grow to about 10 pounds. They're extremely strong for their size, extremely aggressive, omnivores. They eat fruits, berries, fish, lures, flies. And those guys are probably my favorite. I used a 10-pound test spinning gear for those, and they're extremely fun. The pacu fishing is also second to none. There's actually a lot of pacu, but they're very stealthy and hard to catch. So we've kind of figured them out a lot, and now we're catching a lot of pacu. While they're not, crazy aggressive like the peacock that will die for a 10-inch rip roller, if you can finesse them, they're extremely fun species to target. So pacu is definitely one of the prime game fish. And there's 3 different species of pacu: the black pacu, the white pacu, which grow to about 40 pounds, and then the tambaqui, which grows in excess of 100 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an extremely high sought after trophy. And then catfish, we have like 24 species of catfish that are worth catching. Some of them, like the pyara, can grow over 350 pounds. The jau over 150, and they're extremely fun. While we catch those on lures, they're generally on bait.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that, a lot of people we're starting to get more and more interest from people coming here to catfish, and it's really fun because you never know what ate your bait until you caught it. So
Yeah. That's kind of like, yeah, it's funny how bait fishing works like that. A lot of people will hate on bait fishing here in the States, but it's like, you know, it's
it's
a
really
lot of that.
exciting.
Yeah. I mean, when you drop a bait on the bottom, that's sort of part of the fun is that one, it affords you the opportunity to sit and be able to like, bear witness to what other kind of, I don't know, nature's going on around you. But two, you have no control over what is going to pick that bait up. It's sort of like anyone's guess. But, one of the species y'all have that I think is so interesting because it's very similar in appearance to a type of fish we have here is y'all have one. I think it's called a Sardinata. It looks like it like that is a really unique one, and I know a lot of people will mention that it looks like a small tarpon. We have a fish here. It's a family of fish. They're obviously have to be related, but we have these like American shad all down the Atlantic coast. They look very similar. They're just ours like silver and blue and smaller. And it's one of the funnest kinds of fishing we have. But yeah, tell me about that one.
Fun, man. They're addicted to top water. We catch them at the Orinoco Lodge and at the Mapiti Lodge. I've had quite a few clients that come down, and then at the end of the trip, they're like, man, I love the Peacock. I love the Pyara, but I'm coming back because of the Sardinata.
Yeah.
They're extremely aggressive. They hit top water like crazy. We catch them on light gear, like a light fly rod, like a 7 weight or a 10-pound test spinning gear. And they grow in excess of 15 pounds. We've caught them up to 18 pounds. And when you look at 10-pounder, they pull a lot harder than like a 14-pound pyara. So they're extremely strong, and they're very, very, very beautiful. They jump a lot. They're also quite prolific, and they're very aggressive. They do look a lot like tarpon. I think they're probably more closely related to the shad, the American shad. But we're very, very lucky to have them, growing to this size.
Well, if they're getting that big, that's more than double the size of our bigger shad. So, and then our shad are kind of like a funny thing. It's they're not really an active predator at all. It's like they're only biting during their migratory run. It's kind of like a reactionary bite. So, like the predatory like behaviors of those things seem so interesting to me. That's a really cool species of fish there. But yeah, so the other thing that I'm thinking though, I was like, I mean, the fishing speaks for itself, and like the photos that y'all have on your pages. I mean, dude, I could sit and scroll it all day long. It's like the stuff dreams are made of. But that side of it is cool to me. But like a person like me, I'm very fascinated by these kinds of trips just with the experience as a whole, like the things that kind of go beyond just the fish. And I've mentioned this on this podcast many times that like before I was an angler, I was just a kid obsessed with wildlife. And like, I mean, I was dreaming of going like South America or the Amazon or the jungles from the time I was a little bitty kid. Are you still there, by the way?
Yeah, I'm here. I just had to answer a message real quick.
It's all good. I had to make sure. You never know what's going to happen. But so like that interest is like still like way in my DNA. So it's like while the fishing is cool, I'm very interested in like, the atmosphere around. So I don't know, man, just tell me about like if somebody was to go down there on to any of these lodges, Orinoco or Mapiri, or sorry if I'm pronouncing these wrong, any of the ones that I don't know about for the freshwater side of things. What is some of the wildlife that they may encounter, from the birds to different mammals to reptiles and whatever? Like what could somebody realistically see when out on the water down there?
Yeah, so the birding in Colombia, as I mentioned before, is second to none. So the birding while you're fishing here in the rivers is incredible. You see a lot of species of macaws, a lot of species of kingfisher, a lot of species of wild turkeys, and just smaller, very interesting birds, parrots. Tapir, lowland tapir, which is generally very hard to see. We see quite a few of those. Every year we see a few jaguars, and we see a lot of capybara. We see peccary, or wild boars. We have white-tailed deer here. We see quite a few of that. The species of rodents that grow to about 30 pounds that are actually great eating. They're called guagua or lapa. We see quite a bit of those as
Hmm.
well. Snakes, we see anacondas every year. We see a few venomous vipers and coral snakes, although are not really that easy to run into. Really cool species of tree boas, the emerald tree boa, the rainbow boa. Um, yeah, the snakes are very unique. The poisonous dart frogs. There's several places while we're fishing that we can run into them. In terms of crocodilians, we can run into a bunch of different species, which is actually quite unique. The smooth-fronted caiman, the spectacle caiman, the Orinoco crocodile, the American crocodile are all species that inhabit the areas that we're fishing and that we ran into, every year. So, but yeah, the Wild Fish Colombia, it's one company. We offer three different freshwater operations, and the geography changes considerably from one to the other, as well as the pH levels and the wildlife that we see. But there really it's impossible to pick one of the trips. So usually people come back and fish several of the different freshwater destinations because really they just complement each other.
Yeah, that's awesome. So So on top of the fishing, obviously you have the opportunity. I would like strongly suggest people be bringing like cameras, like photography grade gear, so as to not miss those things. But so there's that, and then it's like, just tell me about, I don't know, man, like the lodges themselves, like where are people sleeping? I don't know, amenities wise, is it like a pretty comfortable setting? Is it very rustic, or do you have the option to make it as hard as you want it to be? Like, what is somebody's
So
day-to-day living going to be at camp?
when we started the company 9 years ago, we were using very simple accommodations, very simple food, very simple tents. Right now, 10 years down the line, in our biggest operation, which is the Orinoco Lodge and then Mapiti Lodge, we've built pretty comfortable lodges with wooden cabins, air cooling units, designed. The menus are designed by chefs. So we've really up that a lot. So we made it comfortable while still being extremely remote.
Mm-hmm.
You have electricity all night, all run by generators. And then in our saltwater operation, we just opened up a brand new luxury lodge that has 8 luxury rooms, a pool, and that's a totally new level of comfort that we're equaling or surpassing the lodges in Central America in terms of accommodations. So really, that's one of the areas where we've progressed a lot during the years in terms of upgrading our service. The fishing is always going to be amazing, or that potential for the amazing fishing is always going to be there. But now we've made sure that everything else is, a dream vacation as well.
That's awesome. Yeah. Oh man. So you mentioned the saltwater thing, and I've been wanting to go there. So it's like, at heart, I'm more of a freshwater guy. But I mean, now I'm living in Florida. It's like it's inescapable to want to like dip into the salt water, and just in the spirit of being a more well-rounded angler who does more things and experiences more things, I think it's important to be able to do both. But you know, when I first thought Fish Colombia, I've been following y'all for half a decade at least. I was thinking, okay, this is like a jungle expedition. This is jungle fishing. This is living in the jungles. This is very rustic, you know, middle of, you know, middle of these dark water rivers type of fishing. But it was probably within the last year or two that I started seeing y'all doing more the saltwater stuff. I would credit probably a lot mutual friend Derek Olbridge, Hanover Fist, who he was quick when he learned that me and you were going to talk. He was singing your praises. So shout out to him. But man, some of the photos I was seeing of that guy, obviously doing the freshwater thing, but then these giant cubera snapper, the just all the crazy different kinds of saltwater fish. I was like, holy cow! Like, is this a different thing? But tell me a little bit about y'all's saltwater experience. The lodge there, is this Darien Lodge is the name I've been seeing?
Yep, Darien Lodge. We opened up the new Darien Lodge, which is in the same location that we've been fishing on the Pacific for about 9 years. We opened the lodge about a month ago, and it's just more luxurious accommodations in the same location. So the Pacific fishery that we have is in the absolute opposite side of Colombia as the freshwater fishing.
Okay.
The freshwater, the eastern plains, and the saltwater fishing is in the North Pacific. So on the western northern edge of Colombia. And it's also jungle fishing in terms of it's the only place in the entire tropical Eastern Pacific where there's no roads up or down or anywhere on the coastline. It's just jungle meeting sea. And it's the heart of the Darien Gap, which is one of the densest, most conserved jungles in the world and one of the rainiest places on Earth. So it's extremely biodiverse. The fact that there's no roads leading up to it not only means that you're in a very exclusive place where very few people go, but it also means that there's no one killing the fish to sell it by car or taking it out, in any other way. So the area is very, very conserved, and it's also jungle fishing while on the ocean. And then we have little rivers that we can go up on the Pacific coast for targeting smaller species of fish, up to 4 pounds that are endemic to the area in freshwater. But you're also fishing pristine ecosystems that haven't been, affected by humans, that are in great shape with, catch a lot of fish. But the jungle fishing here in the coast, it's insane because also the drop off. Not only is the entire coastline the most conserved area in the Eastern Pacific, but the drop off is the closest to the coastline in the entire tropical Eastern Pacific. Just 2.5 miles from shore, it drops down to 1,500, 2,000 feet. So that's unique in itself. So we're catching tuna, yellowfin tuna up to 200 pounds, 5-minute run from the lodge. And 5 minutes from there, we're catching tarpon, cubera, snook. So it's very, 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 very diverse, the fishery.
So I guess the thing I was curious about, you said that there's no paved roads, all of that. The first thing I'm wondering is, like, how in the hell are you getting boats into the water? Like, where are you launching from?
250 miles from very southern Pacific of Colombia all the way up the coastline. Everything comes by barge. So like all the construction materials, all the gasoline, everything's by barge. So it's obviously very expensive to operate, very logistically complicated. But that for me is the beauty of it. The more remote, that's why I do it, So I like going the most remote I can.
Well, I'm sure having the engineering mindset, you probably have the right amount of analytical, vision for that kind of thing. But just tell me some of the different species that y'all are specializing in. I have each listed down that I see that kind of stick out. But like you mentioned snook, and I was curious, are these the same snook we have here in Florida, or do y'all have the black snook that I've seen or some?
In the Pacific Ocean, we have the black and the white snook that grow both over 50 pounds, and it's a different species. We have tarpon that actually cross through the Panama Canal and have established populations, and we've caught them huge, over 250 pounds. We catch a lot of sailfish, a lot of blue marlin, black marlin, some of the biggest mahi-mahi on Earth, cubera snapper, roosterfish, almaco jacks, broomtail grouper, warsaw grouper, barrelfish, wahoo, Spanish mackerel, jack crevalle, huge bluefin trevally, mullet snapper. There's really just an endless amount of species that we target: yellowfin tuna, big-eyed tuna, jack tuna.
Yeah, that's cool. Those warsaw groupers that's one that's always interested me. That is just I imagine, is that more of like a deep water species there?
Yeah. Taking those from 400 to 800 feet of water.
Now, is there an option to release those? Because all the photos, they got the big buggy eyes and.
No, they all die.
So
they all die before they make it to the surface, because they once they come up 200 or 300 feet, then slowly up, the air inside of them expands, and once they start to expand, they start to float up really fast. And once the faster they come up, the more they expand. So by the time they make it to the surface, all their internal organs have exploded.
Yeah, because that's one of those ones where on the top end, they're real upper end sized specimens are mind blowing how big they can get. I mean, they're a 500-pound fish plus.
I think 350 or so, 400 pounds. I think that world record. We've caught them up to 50 pounds only, but we're just starting to get more and more into this deep dropping game. So there really wasn't any fishing of any sort, any recreational sport fishing on the whole Pacific coast of Colombia up until 10 years ago. And we're just kind of learning as we go, traveling other places, learning from there, implementing it here, bringing captains from abroad. But yeah, just kind of like untouched, uncharted waters.
What seems to be like the real breadwinner there with the saltwater fish? Is there one that seems to be like the main attraction?
No, I would say last year we caught the biggest mahi-mahi anywhere on Earth and way more than anywhere else. So that was kind of a big draw. The year before we caught a tarpon that was reeled in by several people. So it didn't count as a world record. There would have been around the all-tackle world record. That definitely brought in a lot of people down. So the cubera snapper on top water, there's only a few places on Earth you can do that. So a lot of people come down for that. The endemic species of the eastern tropical Pacifics, like the roosterfish, the cubera, the mullet snapper, bring in a lot of people. But the tuna popping as well, we have some of the best tuna fishing on Earth, so a lot of people come for popping. But I would say no, it's very, very diverse, the fishing we do. A lot of people come down looking for different species.
Yeah, that cubera fishing, the topwater cubera videos and photos y'all have, that's probably the one for me. It's kind of like the running joke of this show, though, is like I feel only 20 episodes into this thing so far, but I don't know, time and time again I mentioned that I get terribly seasick. It's like the big joke about me. Like I've tried everything to get around it. I'm like, man, I want to make that trip, but how can I get around the seasickness? But it's like, dude, like the cuberas, the photos that y'all have of those things, I'm like, I got to figure something out, because that is an experience I've got to get under my belt. But
part of the Pacific Ocean, we don't ever really have very rough seas. We can fish all year round. Okay. It's usually like, and there's a lot of seasickness pills that will completely for you. But yeah, one of the unique places about this fishery is that there's great fishing for yellowfin, for instance, off South Africa. But you get there and there's a 50% chance that it's going to be too rough and you can't go fishing. That's never a thing here.
Well, that's good news, and that makes me feel a little bit better. I think I'm being a little hard on it. I like jazz it up, make it sound like a bigger problem than it really is. But it's like I had enough bad experiences that I'm like, oh shit, I am not going back out there. But I don't want to miss out on some of these different kind of fish. It's like, everybody's got like their bucket list fish. You know what I mean? Like everybody's got like, oh, these are like the ones I want to catch. And then like saltwater, that's definitely one of them. Roosterfish is a big one for me. I'd like to do that from shore. I'd like to get one of those I know that there's some opportunities in some areas to do the land-based. Now, I guess that's another question. Do y'all have opportunities to do shore fishing for saltwater, or is that really part of the deal? Like,
we do. It's just you have to swim from the boat to the beaches, which we do that sometimes. As I mentioned before, no roads at all, so all these beaches are 100% conserved. There's no one throwing lures or bait off the beaches. It's unfished. So we do have success doing it. We just have to find the right kind of person who's willing to swim 200 feet to get to the beach. But a lot of people do it. So David, I actually have 2% battery, so I think we should wrap it up before I jump out of the call.
Yeah, no problem. I think I was kind of winding down anyway, but for sure. Well, we'll start to close out then, but Alberto, man, you run like basically you're like the deliverer of dreams. You know what I mean? Fish Colombia, I think is, man, it's got to be one of the top places worldwide that I want to visit, and other people should too. And we've highlighted obviously the opportunities that people have to go there and experience something unique in freshwater and in saltwater. But the people that are listening who would want to go and see this themselves, whether it be a YouTube channel or a place where they can see videos, a website, Instagram accounts, what are some of the Instagram handles, YouTube, like where can they go to find this stuff?
So you can find us on Instagram at Fish Colombia or at Darien Lodge. We also opened up one for the Orinoco Lodge, which would be at Orinoco Lodge. And then we also have a YouTube channel. We have it's All Fish Colombia. And we post a lot of very cool fishing videos. We have a full-time videographer, producer that's constantly producing new videos and pictures. This is it's very, very fun Instagram to follow. If you're not following us yet, you should definitely give it a check.
Oh, 1,000%. And I'll throw that up here. I urge anybody to go check it out. And who knows, maybe in the next 2 years, 3 years, I'll get lucky and have some photos on there of myself, because that's a trip that's going to 100% happen. But
awesome.
Excuse me, Alberto, I appreciate your time. You're a busy man running an incredible business. Appreciate you coming on here, dude. I'm going to let you get to it.
David, thank you so much for the opportunity. I look forward to having you down here.
All right, man. Have a good one.
You too. Talk to you soon.
Yep.
Thank you for listening to the Boundless Pursuit podcast. If you enjoyed this show, your feedback, comments, and reviews are very important to me. Also, this podcast is just one element to a much bigger content outlet. I urge you to head over to www.haverodswilltravel.com, where you'll find audio, visual, and written editorial content. That is 3 dimensions of awesome fishing content brought to you by a very dynamic team of anglers. I hope that you'll tune in next week as we continue to build this program and have interesting and skilled anglers each Thursday. Thank you for listening.